Hello, hello. Lyndall here, Music as a Metaphor. I'm jumping on today to do a little impromptu talk. Hope this finds you well. It's the day after 4th of July, and I have some things on my mind, and I thought it would be a good idea since I'm doing pre-recorded shows, mostly this summer, due to a travel schedule and being all over the place. But I found myself with some time today, and something happened yesterday that I thought was interesting and pertinent and brings up many discussions about the music industry that we really haven't had yet here. So let me jump right in. This has happened to me more than once when I'm out and about. At this particular occasion, I was at a big music festival. And first of all, the top 3 headliners were all DJs. And this brings into a topic that has been on my mind lately. And yes, I understand that I'm being emotional about this probably, but there is some hyperbole when I say this, but I think DJs have ruined the world. Let me be honest with you. I have never, this whole time, I really haven't been that adversarially thinking about DJs, even though for working musicians, working class musicians who made their bread and butter playing at live events, DJs have completely taken over that market, right? I mean, they're just way more affordable. People like to hear, it's much easier to just play a bunch of, even if it's radios and, even if it's vinyl records, which used to be a way harder work than what the DJs do now, where they basically bring a laptop. Even that just does not compare to musicians trying to interpret covers for people through their live instrumentation. So many people just continue to not only prefer the ease and affordability of DJs, but also the fact that they can hear their songs exactly the way they want to hear them. The variety of music they can hear is way more than a band could provide. Though I have been to many events recently where it's almost a hybridization of live musicians and DJs. And I appreciate that people are still doing that, trying to do that. In certain instances, I went to an event recently where there was a DJ, but they would play drums and timbale, or have a horn player come out and play along with the tracks, which I will say is much easier type of music than creating the entire foundation for the music yourself and then playing the melody on top, yada, yada. But I appreciate that the live instruments do elevate the DJ music a bit. I appreciate that. Then there's the flip side of it where I've actually seen a huge working band, a wedding working band, where especially the keyboardist was kind of like a DJ and a keyboardist. And so they really were playing excellent music. It was a huge conglomerate of maybe like 10 musicians. But they were also DJing when they weren't playing, they were DJing. And then in certain instances, the keyboardist was using so many samples from music that it was almost like a mix of live instrumentation and DJing. So these are all the different ways that I've seen DJs integrating with live instruments, and people, I think, still prefer on some level live instrumentation, but DJs themselves have completely taken over the market. And in many cases, in this particular case, this is a festival that's been happening many years in a row that I was at, and this is the first year that it was the top 3 headliners were all DJs. And there was maybe one American Idol singer earlier, and I didn't get to see her set, so I don't know how much was actual musicians versus just backing tracks for her. But the whole lineup really wasn't featuring any live music at all. And then you had these top 3 headliners as being DJs. And I was there for only one of them. And number one of my biggest complaints is that the music is always too loud these days. And I literally mean on a sound torture level. Now, this is micro to macro. This is not just at these big festivals. It is at, in my opinion, restaurants where they even just have Pandora playing too loud, and it inhibits conversation. But also, even when you go hear, live music on smaller venues, the music is just too loud. And that's not even to say, fine, maybe you don't want conversation. Maybe you really do want people just listening, but you don't have to sound torture them. And for me, there's a threshold when I literally feel a piercing in my ears And this piercing is not good for your ears. Okay, you shouldn't feel physically ill from the music that you're listening to. Now, you can get very used to it, and so you don't notice it. You numb out, right? Like any kind of poison, you can numb out to the effects that it has on your physical body. And maybe it's thrilling to have it very loud, but I just don't understand it. And at this particular thing, it was a DJ, and it was so loud. The music was so loud, and we were not even close to the stage, and it was just untenable. Now, part of it was like I was there at a point where the people were kind of starting to fill up, but it hadn't yet. So definitely when there's more bodies there, I understand you need to have it louder, and I understand that we were there maybe a little bit before that was the case. But you're telling me for that type of apparatus, you can't just be bringing up the volume as it needs be. You have to set it on this earlier volume that's going to just literally hurt people to hear it. Now, in this particular case, it was also the fact that I know that many of these things are rituals and altars to entities and gods that these musicians are serving that I don't personally want to have any part of, right? I don't want to unwittingly or wittingly be part of these things. So I'm very much, standing my ground when I go to see these things. But I will be honest, many times there's times when I'm actually enjoying that, right? I'm enjoying the music, even though in the back of my mind I know, like, hey, what is this about? Who is this? Is this a pure artist, or is this an artist that's, got all this symbolism and all these things going on and is secretly doing rituals? Like, I'm very, very well aware of this. And if you are not well aware of that, then stay tuned to this channel because we will talk more about that. But you could certainly look into somebody like Mark Devlin. I mean, Isaac Weishaupt. There's so many people out there these days that are cracking the code on, especially bigger concerts, being used as rituals. Like let's say Old Testament rituals. So I was aware of that, but I will say from another level, it was just not even entertaining. It wasn't even remotely tempting to want to be a part of this. This sounded ridiculous to me. No song lasted for longer than a minute. He was mixing all kinds of different genres, and none of it to me was there any rhyme or reason. It all sounded campy and cheap. And the worst part was that he was continually yelling out over the music, like, hey, what you get going? What's going on? That stuff. And no part of me could listen to this and say, hey, this is art or this is a craft. It just wasn't to me. So I'm probably insulting many, many people out there who are DJs, and it's going against my notion that any music is better than no music. But this, for me, was so unenjoyable. So what I ended up doing was getting out of the fire, I would say the aim of that sound that was just absolutely piercing my ears, hurting my ears. I also, at one point, I tried to strategically get past a second set of speakers so that I was then, on the flip side of that speaker, and then the next speaker up was still very far away, the one coming from the actual stage, which I wasn't getting too close to. So I thought I had found like a dead zone, basically, where I could sort of stand the sound. But at that point, it was physical. The ground was shaking. And if you could see, I'm so terrible at describing distance, but I was not close to the stage at that point, okay? So to me, it was very, very clear that this was not a healthy thing for the body, okay, to come up close. And where this was at, there was even architecture and things that were, I believe, being invoked and part of this whole thing. And it was very clear to me that I didn't want to have any part in this. So I start praying, and I was actually ready to go, but instead we ended up finding a spot that was sort of off to the side, out of the firing squad of the actual, sound. And this was sort of like, the sound was, trust me, still very, very loud, but it was having to bend to get to us, basically. And then on top of that, I sat behind some things. So I kind of got as far away from the music as I could. And part of this was because I was curious. I'm not out listening to enough live music really, probably to really understand what's going on with the culture. So this was an opportunity for me to listen in a little bit, and I wanted to. As I described, I'm really critical of this DJ, but I was trying to give him a chance. I really was going to sit behind this and just sort of listen with a buffer now. I took the edge off of the sound, so it wasn't like piercing my ears and like literally hurting my ears. I didn't feel my internal organs being shaken from the physical sound, so I thought I was safe to sit here. Well, this is what was interesting. So out of nowhere, somebody comes and sits down. And right off the bat, this person did not look very healthy at all. Overly skinny, definitely looked like they were already pretty messed up on something, and started talking. And, you know, these days I'm very discerning because you just don't know, right, what's going on. But I'm also very careful to not allow, you know, this sort of innate antisocial behavior that's become normal to be so closed off to people. Like, I love the opportunities to meet people and talk with people that just kind of coincidentally, quote unquote, land in your zone. But when this guy came in, it was very clear to me. I had already been praying, but I started praying even harder. And it was almost that recognition of like, you know, is this an agent? Like, what's going on here? Is this guy kind of sent over to mess with us? Is he trying to get information? Is he eavesdropping? Is this guy need help? You know, is this a guy that actually is being drawn to me for a different reason? Is he being drawn from a ministry standpoint? You know, and that every person that comes to you is a soul possibly, you know, seeking help. And is there something that you can offer from the realm of being an instrument for Christ? So very carefully, we were having a conversation with him, and we found out from him that he, according to him, is a famous drummer. Now, the interesting thing was he told us his name, which I'm not going to mention here. He told us his name, and I guess he was like waiting for, I'm not sure what he was looking for. And also in this, even before this, I think he had kind of confessed to us that he has some issues, and I won't go into those as well, but he did actually end up, before he even told us this part, confessing that he's going through some tricky things and not necessarily in a good place. So I was praying for him in my mind, and we were trying to, you know, actively offer some friendship to him in a way that we were still being kind of guarded, because there was something strange. It was like, if somebody's under the influence of alcohol, drugs, crack, cocaine, it's very, very possible that their aura is ripped and that they are under the influence of entities, that they do not have any control over that. So it was still very much a game of cat and mouse, and there was something going on with him. I don't know what, but there was something going on. And so as he starts to talk about being a drummer, it was almost like, I think it was supposed to be a trap for me or something. And this is, you know, he had found out that I was a musician. And I guess this happens, you know, like it was like he was, I think, messed up, but kept like playing with this notion of like, oh, if you only knew who I was, I don't even want to tell you who I am. And I was like, fine, don't tell us who you are. Like, we don't want to know, really. We're just kind of trying to have a conversation with a person who seems like they're having a hard time in life right now, as many, many people are. And also kind of like looking for, like, should we go ahead and get out of this conversation? Because is this going to become weird at some point? And it was becoming weird at that point because he was toying with me with it. Like, I guess thinking it was just going to be irresistible to me. And at one point he was like, look me up right now. And I was like, I never do this. I don't really care who you are, you know? And I said, I'm probably not going to be impressed when I do find out who you are. I said, because the truth is and I didn't really tell the entire truth, because in many of these scenarios, I'm so used to having a wall up and not completely being honest with people to their face. And it's something that I'm really working on. But in this instance, he was just, trying to act as the conversation progressed. It was like, oh, I'm from a big label, and why haven't you, do you have a demo, and have you ever submitted it to labels? Well, this is actually an interesting question, because when I thought about it, I really haven't. I really have never submitted my music to labels. And I wasn't equipped. And he said, well, why? And I wasn't fully equipped to answer that in that moment, because this is what's interesting for many, many musicians like myself. We've just been making the music, and it's been harder to actually pursue the business side of music. Now, maybe not for a lot of musicians, but I'll say for me, it has been. It has been a calling, such a calling to step up and do this. And because of that, the music side has always been an afterthought. And it's not something that I've been against. It's not like I was like, oh, I'm not going to try to reach out to labels. But I really haven't. And I've done some self-produced material. I've thought about reaching out to more of promotional type of sync houses. I've thought about all these things, but when it really comes down to doing it, I really haven't done it. So that's what I wanted to bring up today is this question as to why. Now, what I answered him was, when he asked me in the moment, I said, well, I really don't even understand how the music industry works. And that is true on a certain level, because we're at the level that this guy was in, if he's telling the truth, and I believe there's some level of truth to what he's talking about, is that he found some level of success as a drummer and has now been participating with a label, and he is pretty high up, has some level of influence or some level of power, is friends with people in certain bands, and yeah. So those guys, I'm not on the same level as them. I don't really know what their industry is like, and for many years, it felt like a closed door to me for whatever reason. It's like I just couldn't even really understand how it functions. I didn't really understand how you break into it. And then a lot of times what I do know about it, it's not great. It's like a lot of times the labels, at least in the old school days, they were taking the rights to the music. They weren't necessarily helping you. I mean, there's so many stories of people who, got some big record deal, but the company itself, the label itself, buried the music and they didn't have the rights to it anymore. There's so many nightmare stories like that. So when I said I didn't understand what the music industry, I was sort of more coming from that level. Like, I haven't necessarily wanted to be part of it. I haven't understood how you become part of it, number one. Seems like a club to me. And it seems like you can't just send, like, it doesn't really work to just send your music to a label. And they're like, maybe 30 years ago. And they'd be like, oh, we love it. Let's make this record. Let's pull you in and we're going to give you all the money you need to make a record. Maybe it does happen that way for some people, but it never seemed possible for me. But I think on a deeper level, it's also because I haven't wanted to be part of like a B system. I haven't wanted my music to be part of a B system. For a very long time, I haven't wanted to work for B systems. I've tried to walk a line where I'm free and clear, and it doesn't matter if I'm only playing music for 3 people, if I'm doing it the way that I think it should be done and from a purified way. That's what was more important. And I guess Mark Devlin is a great musical researcher who kind of questions, like, is it all corrupted? And I don't actually really think that. I think that where I'm at now, I'm sure there's plenty of musicians that actually have pretty successful careers and they're making music their way. I don't really doubt that. I don't want to think that that would be the case, that that the only music that you really get access to on some level has been compromised. But there is an argument to be made for that. I think it's a fair argument at times that if anybody gains any kind of traction, even the stuff that you have on social media, it has been co-opted or manipulated, if not before, then after. That there's some level of truth to that. I can see how that's the case, and I've maybe been afraid of that. And definitely, when I first started finding out about this stuff, which was maybe around 2015, before that, I had had a very strong intuition that it wasn't about notoriety or fame for me. It was just about like being a working class musician, boots on the ground, playing music, if it was for 2 people, if it was for 8 people, if it was for more, whatever it was in God's hands where I was to bring this music, because my calling was through God. And I just watched The Sound of Music yesterday, and that was my role model. Maria was my role model. It was about, educating children, raising up children through music, about bringing the message of the power of music to adults and children, and about, inspiring others through my music and through my teaching to ignite their own creative passion, because I really felt like the Holy Spirit works through creativity. He works through our imagination. He is the compass in our life, but we have to do the due diligence of actually developing craft and forms of worship so that we can get more connected to it. And so many of us are blocked from our creativity by the time, due to the education system, by the time we're 7. So that's really where my focus has been this whole time. And I've dipped my toe into the traditional music industry, but as far as it ever being about like, oh, I'm going to get a record deal and I'm going to sell all these things, that was just kind of more like a side note. And I didn't really understand why, but in about 2015, when I started getting a lot of exposure to whistleblowers of the music industry, and I started seeing personally some of the things that people have to do, and that sort of most low-level filtering system of just like, I will do whatever it takes. That is the people who are in your competition pool, and that if you're being weeded out, I actually think more energetically than anything, but I think also from a more physical standpoint, whether or not you're willing to jump through these hoops. And over again, I had tangible opportunities where I was not. I would have a test. Like, would I just go ahead and say that and sort of screw somebody over or get out of another commitment to take this opportunity, or, those type of things? Or would I stand in my own integrity and my soul, which is what I did do, and say, well, if it's going to work out for me, it's going to work out for me the right way. It's not going to work out by me compromising myself. And because of that, I didn't make it to the next level. I didn't go to the next round. I would lose those opportunities. There was also like all kinds of crazy self-sabotage too that would come in, and that would be the topic of another episode as well. So it was never really clear, but in 2015, when I started really understanding what was behind all of the music industry, really understanding these rituals, really understanding just some of the outward obvious, it's become very obvious now. And if you're not somebody who really understands what I'm talking about in the music industry, is it sort of being a fallen form, that what's popular and what gets presented to us many, many, many times is very compromised and fallen, and actually pushing more satanic agendas than anybody wants to realize or admit. When I started realizing all of that, I didn't want to be part of it, right? And so the short answer for him probably should have been like, because I hear most of most of the people in the music industry are pedophiles, and I'm not a pedophile. Or, just saying some quip like that and kind of seeing how he would respond. Because I was very quickly being put into this like, oh, you want to make it, and oh, I'm a guy who can help you make it. And it was like a power play. It was very clear that he was trying to manipulate me and turn this into a power play, even though he wouldn't even really tell me who he was and what kind of power. He just wanted to hint at it. And then once it was like, no, it was like I made it clear to him I don't really care. And then he was like, no, look me up. And I said, I don't really want to look you up. I never do this. I don't really care who you are. I just am connecting with you on a human-to-human basis. And I said, on top of that, I'm around a lot of really good musicians. I'm probably not going to be impressed. And he was like, no, look me up. So I look him up, and he did not come up anywhere in my searches. And oh yeah, that's because I operate under, he had like, it's so, I think he could have even been lying. I think he could have even been that messed up that maybe he was exaggerating. He was lying. I don't know what it was he was trying to do, to be honest with you. But he was definitely setting up this power dynamic of like, I'm so amazing and special, and I have the power to lift you up. And it's such a freaking game in the music industry. And the people I are with got to see it for themselves, why I've never wanted to be part of that. And these are the successful people, okay? First of all, he looked like death. He looked like he was not far from death. I don't know how old he was, but he was aged beyond his belief. So number one, why would I want to sign with his label when that's what music has done to him? Music should be, a invigorating, a life force, a form of worship that connects you with our divine creator and connects you with that infinite creative power of our living God. And instead, he did not look like that, okay? He didn't look like it. When he talked about the troubles in his life, he didn't have a life like that. So why would I want that? Why, as a musician, would I be like, oh, let me jump through the hoop of this label guy so that I can be on this guy's label and I can make music through his apparatus? It's a death apparatus. I mean, that's not what music should be used. This is not a good sign for what music should be used for, okay? Then I pushed back on him because he was like, he got obsessed with it. I was like, listen, I don't care who you are, But then he couldn't drop it. He kept talking about it and kept talking about it. It was so weird. And he kept looking me in the eyes. And I don't know if he was trying to hit on me at this point, if it really was just a play, and if this works for him, is take some musician and make her think, like the Epstein thing, with the Victoria's Secrets, we have this Victoria's Secrets opportunity and then somehow they get the girl to sleep with them out of that. I don't know if he was thinking that was the case. But it's amazing. He was completely delusional if that's the case, because there was, I made it clear that was not the case. And on top of that, I'm an older woman, okay? I don't exactly think of myself as the type of young, naive girl that he was kind of acting like I was just because I'm a musician. It was crazy. Whatever was going on, he was definitely out of his mind a little bit. But it's not the first time that this has happened to me, which is why I want to bring it up. Over and over again, I meet people in the industry that are a level up from me or 2 levels up or 3, and they seem miserable. And they absolutely have nothing that I want to be a part of. This had just happened to me a few years back, and this guy, he actually did present a much more viable opportunity, but it didn't make sense. Nothing about it made sense. It was kind of the same with this guy. It was what is going on here? This doesn't even make sense. What you're trying to get from me, why you're acting like this. Is it just egos out of control? Is it drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it just people being insane? I don't know what it is, but I don't know what they think. And this other time, the guy actually presented me with seemed like a legit opportunity, but it just didn't line up. And this is the way that I am. It's the way I've been with a lot of things. I didn't follow through. My intuition, for a split second when I was walking home from that, my hopes got up and I thought, you know what? This could be it. I can see how there are opportunities out there that could come into a musician's life and change their life overnight. And I know that does happen. And I'm not going to say that it's always happening from, the satanic system's place. I really don't know if that's the case. And I hope it's not the case, because I've heard some musicians that don't seem tainted to me. But personally, when I do run into these musicians that are 2 or 3 levels up, a lot of them seem so bananas. And it's nothing that I want to be a part of. I would much rather have a humble, simple, quiet life where my feet are on the ground and I'm, surrounded by good people and I'm making music from a pure place, a God-centered place of worship, than be part of whatever circus that is, because these people don't seem healthy. And that opportunity, I didn't get back with that guy for a month. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'll go ahead and follow up, because I beat myself up sometimes. I'm not following up these opportunities. Well, whenever I did, he was just cold, because I think that he's expecting and he's used to people jumping through hoops for whatever these guys say at the mere, insinuation that they could help your career. And years later, I heard him come out with a song that was so pandering to the COVID situation, like we heard many, many musicians do. Such a sellout. And there's no way I would have wanted to be part of that either. So I guess my short answer when people ask me why I haven't gotten, shopped out to labels is basically that idea that I've been so cynical to just feel like that's all there is. That's all there is these kind of guys that I'm running into that just, I don't want to do business with them. I don't want to have them in my lives. I don't want to have any open doors at all to them. But I wish them well. I wish them very well, especially this guy that I met yesterday. Like he seemed like he did seem like a kind person. He seemed like a lost person. And, I don't know how many people are like that in the music industry, and I don't even know if that guy was being honest, could have just been, there's so much of that in the music industry is just people lying and saying they're more than they are. And there's so much of fake it till you make it kind of stuff, and I don't know why he would have felt the need to do that with us. We were just real people, and for him to have to go to that place, it seemed like some kind of program or some kind of weird thing, some kind of, maybe it could have even been spiritual warfare. Maybe on some level it was supposed to, get my hopes up and make me think some opportunity and I'm going to jump through some hoop and get me to compromise in some way. Who knows? I have no idea. But at this point, like, I can sniff it out when something's not right. And this was not right. But I wanted to mention it because there might be other musicians out there that have experienced similar things. I know that I was on a podcast with a musician who has kind of put a few things up on his Twitter about like feeling like everybody in his life is Agent Smiths and coming after him. And I do think that when you're on a spiritual warfare place, if you're trying to keep the music pure and you're truly trying to play from a pure place, it doesn't even matter if you don't reach that many people with it. The spiritual warfare is not just for the people with influence on that level, because I think music is that powerful. Okay, that's my opinion on it. But I want to warn others who are picking up their instruments and coming from a spiritual warfare place that this is an energetic war. There's a level of understanding that music is so powerful that you might be disrupting things from an energetic level, and then that can be attracting these type of weirdo setups. So just be careful, because I think on a macro level, there's a lot of taking advantage of musicians. There's a lot of getting money out of musicians for their hopes and dreams of these opportunities. I've seen it happen over and over again to people. And what's legit and what's not, well, that's a discussion of a whole another episode, because what I want to do is come out from the cynical place of thinking that you really can't have any level of success as a musician unless you compromise. I don't want that to be the case. Okay, I don't want that to be the case, because I do truly, sincerely hope that there are actually some good musicians out there that have been able to carve their own way, most likely through divine intervention, right? And so at some point we'll talk a little bit more about how, who those examples are, maybe how you yourself can carve that out for yourself. And that's why I'm thinking I am going to shop out to some labels. I have an album that needs to be released. I've been sitting on it for a long time. And so I have to face the fact that some of this might just come down to my own fears, right? My own inability to really push and follow through. My own fears of being rejected, my own fears of what success would look like, and having to deal with these kind of people coming out of the woodwork at you. Or just dealing with a corroded music industry in general. And really, I mean, at my heart of heart, I just want to be Maria, right? I really just want a quiet little life where I get to sing music with children and sing music to God and dedicate my life to God. But that being said, what if that does mean actually? What if me being obedient, what if I haven't been obedient, basically, by not following through? Like, for example, releasing this album that I've been sitting on that I really love. And I've just been sitting on it because I haven't figured out how to release in this post-COVID world, how to do a release, putting a show together. But when I do, maybe that's where I have to go in, because that happened to me like 2 or 3 years ago. One of the gifts of COVID to me was realizing, like, what are the areas in your life that you've been too afraid to go into? They've been sitting there and you just haven't entered that room. And that's been the music biz, So 2 or 3 years ago, I took a great course by Sherilyn. I highly recommend it, on how to release music like a pro. Some of the course was not for me, because she would actually take you through building your own single. But a lot of the course was for me. She was filling in so many holes because I, did so much on my own in those years. I call them the Brooklyn years. I would be working 7 days a week, and then I would be creating music and trying to release it on the side. And I'm so proud of myself for doing that. But so often I just barely had the bandwidth to really look into this stuff. So I signed myself into a lot of bad deals with distributors, a lot of the standard deals, news alert, are not good for the artist, and you really have to read the fine print on a lot of these things. You really do have to spend some time. And I've spent years now untangling some of these legal things because it takes a very long time. There's so much bureaucracy. And when you go through a lot of these online distributors nowadays, it can be very empowering that you don't have to go to labels to release music and then, send the music out to different places, which I did do. I didn't hit the labels as much, but I was sending out my music to different places. But, it takes a lot of time and energy. And I had decided that I had neglected that. And it was a hard place to go into. I really hated doing it. So I made myself. And Sherilyn's course helped a lot with filling in some of the gaps of that, and then dealing for the last 2 years untangling it. And that was my excuse. Well, I can't release new material until I get these old albums untangled, and completely under my own label, and completely, it was an energetic thing for me. It was an integrity thing. It was basically saying, I took the time to really create this music. I should at least have all of the legal foundation underneath them in place. It's empowering, and it's honoring myself as a songwriter. And Sherilyn's great about that. She really brings a message of, if it's unworthiness that's being hidden in how you're handling your music, she's really great at sort of bringing that to the forefront and saying, no, you deserve to be paid, and I firmly believe that. I think we're being gaslit in the society to think that music isn't valuable and that we shouldn't be paid for our craft. And when you have DJs coming in and, picking off all the opportunities for live musicians, and now you have AI coming in and taking out all the opportunities for the composers, I don't know where that puts us, but don't gaslight yourself into thinking that creating music and writing songs and playing live music is not valuable. We just don't live in a system that fairly distributes money. It doesn't. There's many, many, many jobs that are not being paid what they should. Teachers are one of them. They're not being valued. Mothers staying at home is another. There's no value to being a mother, right? Even though it's such an important contribution to society. We saw this happen in COVID. A lot of the functional jobs that just couldn't go on break are the more lower paying working class jobs, which is one of the reasons why I've so wanted to identify as just a working class musician. I mean, I've just so wanted to be part of the society that actually contributes a real contribution. And unfortunately, many of those people, many of those jobs are not being paid what they should be paid. So don't gaslight yourself into that, though. You yourself hold your value. This is a very, very, very big message. You hold your value. You know what you're offering. And sometimes you're going to have to talk yourself through it. And sometimes you're going to have to talk yourself into understanding the deeper implications of what you're doing with music, because even the power of music itself we're being gaslit out of, to think it's, not as powerful of a spiritual and physical force that it truly is. And those things will be revealed to us. And they are revealed to you the more time that you spend at that vibration and open yourself up to it and open up yourself to the value that you have. Even if you're just starting out with music, do you know how rare you are in this world, that you are picking up the mantle to try to continue live music as a tradition, when so many people are putting it down and just saying, hey, why don't I just pick up an app and I hit one button and it'll create music for me? What's the point in creating music, right? So just know how valuable you are. And in my mind, you're part of what I'm calling David's Army Band, because you're people who are in tune with your heart and your soul and your spirit and truth, and you're picking up an instrument to play from that place of worship to our Creator. You are incredibly valuable. And in this upside down world we live in, you're not going to get the kudos from the outside that you deserve. So you've got to give them to yourself. And for me, I I came from that place. I mean, you have to stand in your own authority to even want to get up and play for like 2 people at an open mic, right? There's a certain level of understanding this that keeps you coming to your instrument every day, that I have something to say, and what I have to say is valuable. And I had fought with that for years, and that's what built my self-esteem up the way it did, is every day chipping away at those voices that were trying to talk me out of that and say, this is a waste of time. You're no good. If you were any good, you would have been discovered. Yeah. Then you find out, well, a lot of the people that were discovered were like willing to do things that I would never be willing to do. So that voice was a lie the whole time. But now, as this journey continues, the last 3 or 4 years, it's been about, okay, I very boldly faced a lot of that, what it takes to own my own voice and share my own voice in public. And as I've spoken here, I'm going to the next level with that, because it's always about growth, right? So I'm continuing that journey with now sharing my thoughts on these things, not just with my private students or these private classrooms I've been in, but on this platform and maybe more platforms, and also on my Substack, and really writing about these topics that I think are so important, but I keep to myself. They've been between God and myself and my journal for all these years. But another dimension to that is the business side and becoming actually strong at your business acumen. I don't really enjoy that side of things. And for many years, I was a purist, and I just didn't want to deal with it. And that was one of the reasons. It was like, oh, the music industry is corrupted, and I don't want to be a part of it. And, the money is corrupted, and I'm fine being poor, all these things. And that was right for me at the time, because I do think that there is such a purity of spirit that can come from getting to a place where you really you're not living for material things, and you really are just happy with very little. And that contentment is invaluable. But the place that I'm at now with the growth in the last few years is recognizing that I don't go to some of those places, though, because I'm afraid, and because there is some low self-esteem in some of those business areas, right? Like me not making sure that my songs are completely, copyright, and the paperwork is there and organized, and, the way that I treat many things. It's like for example, in our houses, clutter can be a sign of a part of our spirit that we're not dealing with, right? It can be trauma. It can be a sign of trauma. It can be a sign of fear. Entities and demons and programs can operate in those hidden areas in our life. So when we get organized, when we get clean, those things don't have the ability to function. And so I recognized that there was some business corners in my life that were not as organized and clean as they needed to be. And so that's the place I've been going lately. And now that that's gotten cleaned up, I don't have an excuse to not. Now it's coming down to like, oh, I just need to go ahead and take the steps. I need to pray about it. I need to pray for the courage. I need to look at what's blocking me from releasing this 3rd album. It's a 3rd album in a trilogy. And if I'm being honest, it's because I think that once I do, I'm going to be going to a next place. This will be the last step of things that I laid out for myself a very long time ago. And I guess I'm ready. I'm ready for basically almost like a blank slate once I get past this step. And in this, what I'm starting to recognize is in this step, though, I want to do it as correctly as I can at this point. I want to be as fair to myself as a musician as possible, because I don't clamor for worldly success in music. It's just really not what's driving me or motivating me to make music. But I also want to honor myself and give myself every opportunity to make sure that I'm not just sabotaging myself or thinking too small or letting my low self-esteem get in the way of opportunities that God might want for me. So I have to be obedient on that level. And right now, when that guy asked me that last night, why haven't you shopped to labels? One of the reasons, I guess, is because I was kind of starting to think that labels are obsolete, to be honest with you. But the truth is that you need help. This comes down to that going from, dependent to independent to interdependent. Really you do need to have collaborations in business. You need to have collaborations with musicians. And I don't believe that I have to be as isolated as I've been. I have to believe that there's other musicians in this growing world that we're in, and this bifurcation that's happening, that are wanting to help and support artists like me. And if I actively seek them, then I can help lift up other people as well. There's got to be a network. I know there is. I believe there is. I've actually already met people that are building these networks as we speak. So those would be the labels that I'd be reaching out to, researching for those type of labels, if they're out there still, and what they would even be willing to do for an artist like me. And if it's not that direction, maybe there's other directions that I can go with my music, right? But I have to be obedient to God. And I made a promise a long time ago to release this music, and that's what I need to do. So that guy last night, I don't know. I still don't, maybe there'll be more insights that come to me about who that guy was and why when I go out in public like that, it's like I'm not out in public that much where I'm just running in, in crowds and masses amount of people. And it's so funny how whenever I do, I end up running into musicians like that. So am I just on their frequency? Is that, what God, or is it agents being sent in from the other side trying to, corrupt me, get my hopes up just to dash me and make me once again feel like it's an impossible dream? Was that the enemy the whole time making me feel that door was shut and that it was an impossibility for me to ever, have a successful music career, to ever actually have a label support? I don't know. I can't answer any of those questions off the bat. What I can say is that I pray for a lot of people who have been caught up in this current music system, who thought that was the only way to go, that they had to do it that way, that they don't have any other choice, because I think they do have another choice. And it doesn't matter how much they've been caught up in whatever they've been caught up in. All they have to do is turn to Jesus at this point, and what is sent to us for evil, God will use for good every time. And he'll shock the enemy every time, right? Because our God, the God we serve, the Almighty God, the God of love and goodness, the one who truly loves us, truly cares for us, he wants to help us to get past the lies in our life that are telling us that we can't, that we're not good enough, that we don't deserve it. He's trying so hard to get us past those voices, because we have the free will. If we want to keep believing him, we can, right? If we want to get discouraged, we can. If we want to believe that, if we want to believe that there's only suffering in this world, if we want to only focus on the suffering, we can. And it's tricky because there's like a level of people that don't see any suffering at all, and they're basically completely asleep and in the matrix, and they don't want to hear about anything at all. Everything is hunky-dory and things aren't that bad kind of thing. And there's a lot of people there. And then you wake up from that and you get to like, oh my God, like the spiritual warfare that's actually happening and what we're all dealing with. It's horrific. It's worse than you could ever possibly imagine. But then you transcend that through the power of the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ in your life to recognize, but it's what feels like a tragedy gets turned into miracles time and time again if we will just allow ourselves to shift, supernaturally, to understand, to allow ourselves to be healed, to confess our sins and confess what is holding us back and bring it to Jesus. Because as I heard today, it was so cool. He will show up every time. That is what Jesus can do for you. And people don't know that if they don't call on him. But when you do, and you do it over and over and over again, and then you sin, and then you fall, and then you this, and then he still shows up to pick you up over and over. It doesn't matter what you've done. He went to the cross for all of us. He did that because he knows the depravity that we can go. Okay, he already knows it. And all you have to do is call on him. His name is so empowering. And what was I? Last week, a song came back to me. I hadn't heard it in a long time. And then I heard it. And maybe I'll sort of close out here with singing this a little bit to kind of clear the air on this discussion, because truly I feel empowered today. I feel empowered. That is dark. I've seen the darkest of the dark in this music industry, and that is not diminishing it. Okay, I'm not trying to diminish it and bliss any out of it, but I'm trying to transcend it and say that even given all that, God still breaks through. His light still breaks through. He still sends his warriors through. And that many of those people that are even caught in that web, I believe many of them did think they were doing some amount of good. They just thought they had to compromise to do it, right? And for those people, I pray a prayer of blessing. And this song is for them as well as others that are caught up in their humility and don't feel empowered enough to share their voice, to share their music, to even play their music. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, break every chain. Break every chain, to break every chain, to break every chain, to break every chain. There's an army rising up before us. There's an army rising up before us. In Jesus' name, 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 Jesus' name. There's an army rising up before us, 'cause there is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. Break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. That's right, folks. And that's the process of sanctification, is using your life, using your words, using your music, using your thoughts to break this programming, these chains that are on all of us, part of the human condition, to come completely free so that you can then help to free others, all in Jesus' name. He is right here with us in this battle. And that was kind of a funny little impromptu thing I just said, because I'm actually trying out a new travel set. If my microphone sounds different, I'm back to my old microphone that I've got running through an interface, but I cannot get my keyboard setup. So frustrating. Cannot get my keyboard to run through my MIDI. So I just played my keyboard, just played my keyboard that was just kind of stuck next to me. It was a little awkward sitting here, trying to play it with one hand, and then turning for two, but I couldn't play two and sing in this microphone setup I have in a mason jar. DIY, do it yourself. So I'm not sure how that turned out, but I'm once again working on, setups, technology, trying to figure out how to get back to being able, while I'm traveling, my full disclosure, my old travel keyboard where I could just plug it right in, it was in my DAWs, no problem, my digital audio workstation, it quit working. And I guess it's just too old. I don't know. Praying about that, seeing if I can get that to work. Otherwise, I guess I have to get another one. But I already have way too many keyboards. I just am a keyboard hoarder. I tend to have way too many keyboards around, and then now I'm in a situation where I have all these keyboards and none of them are working the way I need it to. So welcome to my life. But thanks for listening today. This is a topic that we will revisit, especially as I'm diving into more legal issues and as I get closer to releasing my album, which I've now have to be held to because I said it here. So hopefully upcoming episodes, we're going to talk a little bit more about those blocks and the self-sabotaging that might be holding us back, which I love to discuss. The other thing is I was so inspired watching The Sound of Music, which I've seen a million times, but it just reminded me of the purity of Julie Andrews as a music teacher. And so I want to talk a little bit more of how she can be an inspiration for music teachers out there, The Sound of Music in particular. Such a great example of using music to uplift children, to heal a home. So we'll talk more about that in upcoming episodes as well. But in the meantime, we just passed the 4th of July, so I want to say just some good intentions for the good people of America out there. Not to exclude the rest of the world, and trust me, I know we've been total jerks and bullies, but a lot of Americans actually do have really good hearts, and I pray for the repentance of our country, for the things that we've been doing that we both know about, as well as the things we don't know about, and the ways that our own souls have been complicit in that. And I pray for the purity of our country, that it is a nation that stands indivisible under God, and that so many people in this country now are hitting that bifurcation track of recognizing that they will not stand for evil anymore. They will not allow things to happen unbeknownst to us, just so that we can be comfortable and have comfortable lives. It's not fair. And in that name, that's the America that I think most of us love. Maybe it was an illusion. Maybe it was real, and then it became more of like a dark nightmare that we were just sort of dreaming on top of. But as we look at the underbelly of the nightmare, maybe we alchemically turn it into a country that truly is indivisible under God, aligned with God's will for us and for the whole world, that we will actually be the kind of good neighbors that we dreamed ourselves to be, that we wanted to be, even though we've fallen so short. And we pray to the Spirit, Holy Spirit, to come into our hearts, that we might truly find repentance, that it's not too late for our country, that we would heed the warnings of many of our prophets and right the ship and be willing to look at the uncomfortable, ugly truths of our country, so that we might not be great again, not be the world's ruler again, but just be a decent country. Just be a country that emulates God's goodwill and love to the rest of the world, because we need it now. And may we start in our own little pockets doing that to our neighbors and our friends and our family as much as we possibly can. Can we be a source of love and goodness for so many people who need healing and hope right now? In Jesus' name.